Mic check 1 2. 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 What it do? What it do? What it be? What's going on, family? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, everybody? What's going on? What's going on? Blessings to you. Shalom, grace, peace to everybody out there. What's going on with you? What's going on, family? I know it's a couple of y'all that jumping on here, just waiting on the live to kick off. And want to look at some things here, man. Just look at some things really quick. Look at really quick. It seems like all these old teachings pop back up, whether they are within the conscious community, whether in the Kemetic community, whether in the Israelite community. It seems as though many of us seems to be hearing these things and seeing these things that we had to deal with like 6 years ago. So since they want to rehash or try to come back up, I want to just kind of deal with these things, and hopefully it can edify some brothers and sisters out there. Hopefully it can edify some of y'all. But definitely shout out to everybody that's tuning in. I know that Facebook try to give y'all a couple of minutes here to get some notifications, but that's how we're gonna do it. That's how we're gonna do it. So we'll get started here in just a minute, right here on the book. So I'm just waiting on everybody to jump in here, man. Shout out to everybody who are on their way to Atlanta for the B.O.O.M Passover memorial commemoration. Also, shout out to everybody that has already made it to Atlanta. We are going to be deep this weekend in Atlanta. The believers of one Messiah is going to be deep. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Grace to everybody that is tuning in. Grace to everybody that's tuning in. So I'm going to give a couple more minutes. And then we're going to jump on this thing, man. We're going to jump on it feet first. All right. Definitely. So we're going to get into this real quick, y'all. We're going to get into this real quick. So let me share my screen, and then we're going to go from there. All right. I want to pull up this first video. Pull up this first video by someone who is known in the community. So we're going to pull up this video here by none other than the one and only Ray Hagen. All right, we're going to pull this up And we're going to look at this thing here so we can, I'm going to let y'all hear what he's talking about. And then we're going to break it down, all right? I'm going to give y'all a couple of links, a couple of information. It's not long. It's a very short teaching. I'm trying to do these teachings in within 30 minutes information and let y'all go do your own research, right? But let's look at this here, all right? If you don't know who Ray Hagin is, I'm going to let you do your own research on that. You can find out who he is. Most of you, especially if you are Baptist in some kind of way, you probably will be drawn to Ray Hagin because of the fact the style of teaching that he has. He was a longtime Baptist preacher before he jumped into the conscious community some years ago. And he has this teaching about Yeshua or Jesus being Serapis. All right, so we're going to look at that real quick. Again, this is a old teaching that has reappeared, and certain terminologies within this, I think that we need to look at and really get an understanding so we can make sure that we understand these terminologies and what's being said, right? So let's get into it, all right?
Serapis. They took the name Osiris and combined it with the word Apis, which means the bull. Right. Osiris. It became Serapis. Now here's the deep thing about it. Ptolemy the First tried to incorporate the religion of the Greeks into Egypt by creating the worship of a new god. And this was that god in honor of him called Serapis. Now, it was really a composite deity, as you see here. Again, as I said, made up. It looked kind of dumb, don't it? But hey, you know, the Egyptians had to give him something to appease him.
You know, what's very interesting about this thing here is that it's awfully funny how he says that the Egyptians had to give him something to please him, right? This is very interesting that the question is that I would ask is, why would the Egyptians give something that doesn't look like them when many know that the Egyptians, most of their deities, of course, they had deities that looked like them, more so in the aspect of in those human deities, but also many of the deities that they did make and invent were, or that they worshiped were deities that had animal type figures. So that's one of the things that we should all look at, and it's very important to listen to some of the things that's being said. It sounds good, but my question is, why would the deities give them something? And then later on, Ray comes back and also says things like, well, this was what the Europeans gave us to worship. That's crazy. All right, so let's keep moving here. Let's look at this.
Okay, and as you see here, over here is the Greco-Roman version of Serapis, the painting. How do you know that's Serapis? By the cup on top of his head. Y'all see it? Now, what year are we talking here? Greco-Roman, 135 BCE. So this can't be Jesus. If he had existed, it can't be Jesus. You follow what I'm saying? This is the image that the Greeks made the Africans worship.
So he said, "This is the this is funny, right?" So we're talking about years later. If many would agree that the European image or the light-skinned version of Jesus is a new image, and as far as the painting of it, this is the thing. The thing that's very funny about it is that most Christians, now not all, but most Christians, especially within the Black church, there's a lot of Christians that did have a white image within their church, but also you will find that there were many Christians, like my grandparents and others in my family, that had a black Jesus. In fact, I mean, it's funny because every black person didn't have a black image of Jesus. I mean, in fact, when you start talking about even dealing with the councils themselves, there were many black bishops at those councils, or many who were black leaders at those councils when we start getting into Nicaea and different conversations like that. But I want y'all to really understand, man, that it's a play on words, and also people who really don't study and people who don't know really what's going on historically oftentimes get caught up in this, because he's trying to use something from a antiquity understanding and bring it forward to a modern perspective and say, well, okay, the Egyptians created this, but the white man made us worship this. Think about that. That's funny. Think about it. The Egyptians created this, but the white man made us worship this. Now, this is crazy, because if the Egyptians were the ones in control during this time, then why would they create something that don't look like them? And then later on, the white man would use it to force it on others, especially if, since many of us were taught we were Gentiles, many of us taught we was Canaanites and things like that, and Hamites and things like that. When in fact, it makes no sense for Hamites to create something that looked European in order to worship a god in that time that was European, which would be Serapis, right? That's just funny. So let's keep moving here.
Yeah, buddy. In fact, show you how deep this goes, there was a correspondence from Emperor Hadrian referring to the Alexandrian worshipers. Where's Alexandria? Come on, talk to me. Where's Alexandria? In Egypt, Africa, right? Yes. The Alexandrian worshipers of Serapis, calling themselves what? The bishops of Christ. Now that's deep. There was no Jesus.
Now, this is where I want y'all to really pay attention to this, okay? The wording in modern terminology. Of course, back then, I want you to think about this, because we're going to really get into this letter, and is this letter even legit, right? Back then, in Alexandria, Egypt, during the time of Serapis, they would not have called themselves bishops, okay? They would not. That's a more later term that is used later on, way beyond this particular point in time, if we really did our homework and looked at that. But let's just say, for example, they would have called themselves bishops. If you understand the terminology of what bishop is, also, they call themselves Bishop of Christ. Now, most of us in the modern day, we all look at that word Christ and just focus that our total attention on the Messiah, right? Within whether you Christian or whether you Hebrew, whether you Israelite, whatnot, when we hear that term Christ, we oftentimes only focus that term being designated to the one that we call our Savior and our Messiah. But here's the thing, here's the truth of that, right? That term Christ can be labeled on particularly any deity, right? From the perspective of, because what the term means, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like, for example, like the name Jesus, Joshua would be a common name, even within the Israelite community in antiquity, or within the Hebrew community. The name Joshua or Jesus was a common name. Like pretty much a whole lot of people outside of who we deem as the Messiah carried that name, Jesus. So when we start looking at talking about the terminology of Christ, that term simply means anointed one. So whoever deems one who they worship as anointed, they could say Christ and not necessarily be pointing to the Messiah of the Bible, right? So let's look at this. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. All right, let me see here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share my screen again. And I want to look at some things here. Let's see here where we're at. Okay, so what I have on my screen right here is I want to show you something. Okay, look at this. All right, most of us who to use the term Christ and who we focus, of course, on the Messiah of the Bible. But I want you to pay attention to this. Okay, this word Christ means anointed. All right, that's what it means. It means anointed. And so we label that because we believe that he is the Messiah, and we focus totally that on him. Well, in other cultures, in other communities, that term can also be labeled on someone, and it simply can mean that you're trying to designate them as being anointed. So say, for example, Haru, even though, I don't embrace Comedicism or any form of Comedic theology, well, you can use Haru, you can use Osiris, and anybody, a person who follows that understanding and who is, and that's a part of their worldview, they could call Haru anointed, or they could call him Christ, or they can call Osiris Christ, or they can call Osiris anointed, all right? Because that's all it simply means. But he's trying to make it more than what that is, because he's trying to play on words, and he's also trying to play on people not having understanding of what's going on, as well as historical understanding. It's people who don't even do just simple word studies, right? So let me go back to, let's go back here, and we're gonna look at this PowerPoint.
Serapis, they took the name. There was a correspondence from Emperor Hadrian referring to the Alexandrian worshipers. Where's Alexandria? Come on, talk to me. Where's Alexandria? In Egypt, Africa, right? Yes. The Alexandrian worshipers of Serapis, calling themselves what? The bishops of Christ. Now that's deep.
So this is the funny thing about this, okay? He gives no reference point of where he's getting his information from. Second of all, he does not post or show the entire thing, the entire quote unquote so-called letter from Emperor Hadrian to Servanius. He doesn't show the fullness of that. So that's another thing. All right. He just gives who's involved in the conversation. He gives a date, 134 AD, but he does not give a source where you can go look at it for yourself, to look at the entire letter, which everybody know that has done this. You're not going to find really any scholar that's going to agree that this is an actual letter. In fact, most scholars would attest, when you're looking up and doing the research on it, that it's a forgery of some sort, right? It's not even a legit letter, but yet he only shows a portion of it. And I'm going to show you the fullness of it. I'm going to also give you the link where you can go look it up for yourself, right? So let's move. Let's keep moving.
No Jesus. Right. There was no Jesus. But yet these people refer to themselves as the bishops of Christ. And here's what he says. Egypt, which you commended to me, my dearest Serapis, I have found to be wholly fickle and inconsistent. Putting down Egypt, okay, I can deal with that. And continually wafted about by every breath of fame, the worshipers of Serapis.
I want to stop right here. Now I want y'all to look at this on the screen, okay? Look at what he posted on the screen. He deliberately deleted and took out words. Okay, when you're looking here on the screen and what you're looking at, you don't see any word that says rumor. Okay, you don't see any word that says rumor. Why? Because that was purposely taken out. All right, that was purposely taken out. So what he put on the screen was Egypt, which you commended to me, my dearest Servinius, I have found to be wholly fickle and inconsistent, and continually wafted about by every breath of fame. The worshippers of Serapis here are called Christians, and those who are devoted to the god Serapis, I find, call themselves Bishop of Christ. Now notice you don't see any word that says rumor, right? Well, that word is there in the original letter, all right? If this letter, well, this letter is not a real letter, it's a forgery, right? So let's move in.
Here are called what? Wait a minute. The worshipers of Serapis are called Christians. And those who are devoted to the god Serapis, I find, call themselves the bishops of Christ. Don't take my word for it, family. Go verify it. Just type this in right here on the internet. This whole thing will come up. Now, what does that mean?
So type what on the internet? And he said the whole thing will come up. So what? He doesn't give a source of what to type. He doesn't show it. He just says, type that up and it'll come up on the internet. He didn't give anyone in the audience a source. He didn't give anyone in this particular, that will be watching this video, he didn't give them a source at all. Why? Because if he gives that source and you read it, you're going to find out that he did not give the entire source of what he's quoting of the forged letter. But we're going to give you that. All right. So let's keep moving here. We're almost done with this video.
Means, brothers and sisters, that in Africa, this image of Serapis that goes all the way back to 350 BCE had become the object of worship. Y'all following me? This was by
All right. So here's the thing. What he does not also tell you is that even if it was true, this letter, what he doesn't tell you is he makes it seem as though the entire land of Alexandria, the entire city, was actually worshiping Serapis. What he doesn't say is that within the letter, within the forged letter, that it only mentions some, not all. Okay, so let's look at what it says here. It says here, Serapis is a Greco-Egyptian god. The cult of Serapis was introduced during the 3rd century BC on the orders of Ptolemy I of Egypt as a means to unify the Greeks and the Egyptians in this realm. All right, so let's go to the next. Now, here's the letter, okay, and here's the source. So you can go on Historia, okay? If you want to look up Historia Augusta, you can go to right here, penelope.ucchicago.edu, okay? You can go on Penelope. All right, uchicago.edu, which is penelope.universitychicago.edu. So he does not give you the full source. And what he does, he plays on the word Christian, he plays on the word Christ, he plays on the word bishop, and he knows that most people, especially those if they have some issue with maybe church hurt or some form of issue, or they mad at their pastor and they come into some form of Pan-Africanism or something like that, that what they're going to do is they're going to automatically gravitate to this. Why? Because one, Ray Hagen sounds totally like a Baptist preacher. In fact, if you caught some of his lives, and his main church is here in Atlanta in Stone Mountain. But if you caught some of his lives and you caught some of his sermons, you would swear he was a Christian, a Baptist preacher. Not only that, but you would also hear him playing gospel music. Why? Because he believes that the Bible is good for teaching, but the Bible is an allegory. He doesn't believe that anybody in the Bible existed. He doesn't believe that the Bible has any truth, but he believes that the Bible is good for certain teachings because it have good principles, but he believes that it's allegory. So here's the official letter. He didn't show all of this letter. He showed portions of it, right? And sucked a whole lot of people in. But look what it says here. From Adrian Augustus to Servinius, the council, greeting, the land of Egypt, the praise of which you have been recounting to me, my dear Servinius, I have found to be wholly light-minded, unstable, and blown about by every breath of rumor. Now, he purposely took that out. All right, you're not going to see that in any of that clip that I showed you when he posted the letter that he was claiming he was quoting from, right? So let's read that again. It says, listen to what Adrian says to Servinius. He says, I have found to be light-minded, unstable, blown about by every breath of rumor. So Ray Hagen didn't say this. He made it seem as though Hadrian is giving Servinius a report about something that is officially going on in the land. Not only that, but he makes it seem as though Servinius believes what he's saying. But look what it says. Even though this is a forgery, at the same time, he can't even use or break down or present a good forgery. Basically, he can't even lie straight. So look what it says here. I'm going to read it again. From Hadrian Augustus to Servinius, the council, greeting, the land of Egypt, the praise of which you have been recounting to me. My dear Servinius, I have found to be true. No, that's not what it said. He said, I have found to be wholly like-minded, unstable, and blown about by every breath of rumor. Now, look what it says here. There are those who worship Serapis are, in fact, there are those, he didn't say the city, he didn't say the whole entire community or all the people. He said there are those certain people, not all, not everybody. But Ray Hagen would have you to believe that everybody was doing this, that this whole thing was straight up Serapis worship, and that Jesus was Serapis. All right. But let's look what it says here. It says there are those who worship Serapis are in fact Christian. Okay. Now we also understand what the word means. All right. We looked it up even in the Greek, and it means anointed, which means anointed can be placed on any deity. All right. Any deity can be identified as anointed by the people who believe that deity is anointed. So even in this, Serapis would be also called anointed, or Serapis would be also called Christ for those who worship the Serapis. All right. And those who worship him would also be called Christian, or those be called those who are anointed, that follow the anointed. All right. So look what it says here. And those who call themselves bishops. Now, we also, again, I told you that this term would not be loosely used back during that time in Alexandria, Egypt, right? Because one, even though it's not even a Greek word, that's the thing. It's not even a Greek word, okay? So when we start looking at these things, we'll get more into that whole conversation about that later. But look what it says here. It says, who called themselves bishops of Christ, who called themselves the overseers of the anointed, are in fact devotees of Serapis. So some of these people who call themselves anointed, some of these people who call Serapis anointed are overseers, all right, of Serapis, and they devoted themselves to Serapis. There is no chief of the Jewish synagogue, no Samaritan, no Christian presbyter who is not an astrologer, a soothsayer, or an anointer. Even the patriarch, check this out, even the patriarch himself, when he comes to Egypt, is forced. Wait a minute, hold on. This is the thing that he also left this out. He also left out this thing about the patriarch. All right, look what it says. It says in this, this rumored conversation by a forged letter, even the patriarch himself comes to anoint. So if everyone there worships Serapis as though he wants us to believe, then why is the patriarch forced to worship Serapis when he comes to town if he willingly worships Serapis? All right, if everybody is doing it. But look what it says. When he comes to Egypt, is forced by some. Okay, if everybody is worshiping Serapis, then why is it everybody? Why does it have to be some people is forcing him to worship Serapis by others who worship Christ? Now, I'm going to show you within this fullness of this letter that there was a difference between those who worship Serapis and those who also were separate, who worship the true God of Israel. Okay, I'm going to show you that they even knew that they were not even the same sect, like same community. All right, so let's look at this here. Okay, let's look at this breakdown of this letter that he did not show you. Okay, look what it says. I've highlighted and enlarged the words so you'll know what's in the original letter. That word rumor is very powerful. It changes the whole scenario of what he's trying to get people to believe that's not true. Okay, so look what it says here. There was rumor and there's those, meaning some, and this is not even true. Nobody has verified any of this. All they've done was spreading a rumor or herd. There's no verifiable thing. That's why you see him say, I have found to be wholly like-minded, unstable, and blown about by every breath of rumor, right? So, and then we also see the word force there. Now, let's look at this. I want to pull up something here too that I looked up with even in the modern day. If you go to Egypt today, there's so many Egyptian tours that you can sign up for. All right. So this is from one of the tours of Egypt. Okay. Now let's look at this. Look at what Tours of Egypt has to say about Serapis and the Messiah of the Hebrews. All right. Now look what it says here. It says, nevertheless, how great confusion between Serapis and Christ. Now, if Serapis and Christ is the same person, then why is the Tours of Egypt explaining it as though they're two separate? How is it their confusion? Okay. Look what it says. How great confusion between Serapis and Christ could have existed is really somewhat questionable. Now, wait a minute. So you're telling me the people who are doing these tours in Egypt today is saying that even the comparison between the Christ of the Bible and the Christ of Serapis, or who they identify as anointed, it's questionable. But yet we have people who pushing this crazy, regurgitating this same foolishness that Ray Hagan is pushing and others within the community. They're pushing this whole thing that Christ is Serapis and that the Egyptians created Serapis to worship him, and the white man, who the Greeks and the Romans and the white man forced it on us black people to worship this man that the world called Jesus, but that the Hebrew community or the Jewish community called Yeshua, and yet want us to believe this craziness. But even the people who do the tours in Egypt even say that it's questionable. All right, so let's keep reading here. Look, in 68 AD, a mob of pagans is said to have formed at the Serapis temple in Alexandria, who then descended on the Christians who were celebrating Easter at Bacchalius. All right, now you already know. That. Let's look at in the modern day. Okay, now we know for a fact, all right, that we know what Passover is, and we know what Easter is. Two different things going on, right? But let's look at this, okay? This is even clear where it says that these pagans, okay, descended upon Christians who were celebrating Easter, okay? There they see St. Mark dragged him through the streets. Wait a minute, if they're the same people, if the Christians are the Serapians, then why are they fighting and feuding? Why are the Serapians and why are the pagans coming after those who identify as Christians? Okay, if they're the same group of people. But let's look what it says here. It says, dragged him through the streets before throwing him in prison. Clearly, those worshipers of Serapis and Christ were aware of each other and the differences within their religions. Oh, come on, hold on now. Come on now. Come on now. This don't make no sense right here. This is what it says here. Let's keep reading. Though perhaps at a later date, some amongst the worshipers of either may have chosen to cover all of their options. So it says some. Again, it's not all people. But when we start looking at this also, too, we have to understand that even in this, all right, yeah, there were some people that, may have been worshipers of the Messiah or followers of the Messiah and decided to, hey, man, I like what they got going on over there. Even in today's time, it's the same thing going on in today's time. All right, you have people mixing and jumbling and creating gumbo pots of all kind of belief systems. All right, you see this all the time, even in our modern day. But look what it says. Let's finish up here. On the other hand, some have pointed out that Christus was another name for the Egyptian god Serapis. Christus may be translated as Messiah. So in their worldview, okay, everyone in every different religion, even in Buddha, in Buddhism, they believe Buddha is a Christus. In Hinduism, they believe Hindi is a Christus. All right, so this is just a word that is labeled on those who within their worldview believe that their deity is Messiah to them. Okay, Christus may be translated as Messiah, though the term need not apply to any specific Messiah, such as Jesus. It therefore could have simply been applied to Lord Serapis, so that in fact, there was never any connection at all between the early Christians and the worshipers of Serapis. So now this is on the tours of Egypt. These folks don't even believe in the Bible. And yet they're even presenting the truth and the facts of from a whole different position than what Ray Hagen talking about. Okay, so let's move here. So let's look at the entire letter. Let's try to get the entire scope in this section of this letter. All right, which is a forgery. Okay, again, so let's look at this. We're going to go to 5 here. All right, we're going to go to 5 down here so that way we've already looked at the entire. Matter of fact, I'm going to start from the top. It's not that long. From Hadrian Augustine to Savinius the council, greeting the land of Egypt, the praises of which you have been recounting to me. My dear Savinius, I have found to be wholly light-minded, unstable, and blown about by every breath of rumor. There those who worship Serapis are, in fact, Christians. And those who call themselves bishops of Christ are, in fact, devotees of Serapis. There is no chief of the Jewish synagogue, no Samaritan, no Christian presbyter who is not an astrologer, a soothsayer, or an anointer. Even the patriarch himself, when he comes to Egypt, is forced by some to worship Serapis, by others to worship Christ. They are a folk most seditious, most deceitful, most given to injury, but their city is prosperous, rich, and fruitful, and in it no one is idle. Some are blowers of glass, other makers of paper. All are at least weavers of linen, or seem to belong to one craft or another. The lame have their occupations, the eunuchs have theirs, the blind have theirs, and not even those whose hands are crippled or idle. Listen to this. All these people that he named, all these people that this so-called letter is supposed to be about. Look at what it says here about them. It says their only God is money. Wait a minute. So I thought this was about worshiping Serapis. I thought this was about, if this was so much about worshiping Serapis, then how, even the people that are of Serapis, how is their God only money? I thought their God was Serapis. I thought the Egyptians created Serapis, okay, and the white man used Serapis to force us to worship the Hebrew Messiah, okay? But clearly, in this forged letter, it even says that all those folks, the Serapians and everybody else, they only God is money. And this is the Christians, the Jews, and in fact, all nations adore. So I'm just trying to figure out where's this, why we couldn't get this whole letter here? Why couldn't we get a link to go view the whole letter? Why was we told to just go type it in and it'll come up? No, when you type it in, all kind of foolishness comes up. All right. So this is important, man. All right. And we should just really pay attention to all of this other stuff. I'm not going to even get in later on. I'll get into the next lesson on this whole thing about the allegory deception. You know, I'll get into this whole allegory deception later after this at a later note. But man, listen, I just want to just jump on here. These old things keep popping up. So every so often, you know, we have to address them and look back at them. So that way the next group of people who are coming along, they won't get swept up by this craziness. All right. All right. Blessings to you all, man. Shalom to you all. Take care.